Welcome to the Ruffells ad break, the first of the Ruffells Roughcasts. I'm Tim McInnes, Managing Director. In this podcast, we dig into how the creatives we work with get the most out of every brief to deliver best results for you. At Ruffells, we're all about the people, and when we're working with best in breed, it's easy to get great results. But when the majority of our effective brain time is spent at work, we reckon you might as well enjoy the ride too. Joining us this episode is Clare Mackey, award-winning producer, writer, actor, and voiceover artist. She has starred in dozens of TV commercials in Australia for clients like McDonald's, Woolies, and KFC. She signed with Australia's biggest voiceover agency, RMK, and is the unofficial voice of Google Australia. Her producing credits include Christchurch earthquake doco, Help Is On The Way, which was nominated for Best Documentary at the 2021 NZTV Awards. She's a Sydney girl who lives in Christchurch with her Kiwi husband and two small people. In this episode, we talk about being famous for a few weeks, staying engaged on every project, and what it's like being on the other side of a voiceover session. Less from me, more from Clare.
Ruffells ad break.
The best yet. Incredible.
Ruffells ad break.
We've known you as a producer, somebody who runs a spreadsheet, gets shit done, makes things happen on the clock, gets into it, because that's how when you came to Christchurch, how you were introduced to us. But you've got a long history of being, not that long, I'm not saying
Long-sorted
that,
history.
Long-sorted history of being the face of, being, aspirations of becoming a famous actor.
Yes.
Actress.
Well, I've always said actress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to in 2022?
Probably not now, but we're old, so.
But we were.
Yeah.
And you've done some big brand work and been the face of brands. And latterly you have also become the unofficial voice of Google Australia. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's got to be a great gig, right? So
it's a great gig.
So let's talk about that. Where did you start?
I started in Canberra, which is about the same size as Christchurch. And I did theatre all through school, and the youth theatre there was amazing. Yep. And then towards the end of high school, I realised that acting could actually be a career. And I thought, this is it. I got this. I'm going to be famous. I'm going to get into NIDA.
How did you know? Did you have a moment where you went, this is a real pathway, this is a career option?
I think it's because I had this incredible drama teacher in year 11 and 12, and we did a production of a play called The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie, which is about a school teacher, kind of older school teacher who rallies the troops. And so I played that character and I did a full Scottish accent, and people loved it and I loved it. And I don't know, I always had the bug, but I think that made me think I had the chops to make it.
Yep.
But then I didn't get into NIDA or VCA or WAPA for 2 years that I tried. But I met a lot of those actors who were auditioning for those schools, and they were moving to Sydney when they graduated. So I kind of followed them, and they had agents and they were getting auditions, and I started doing Australian theatre for young people, which is where Kate Blanchett started, Rebel Wilson. So I did a play there that agents came to see, and that's how I landed my first agent.
Yeah, great. And from that, you were kind of, I suppose, still at a really young age, exposed to what that world could be or the potential that...
Yeah, there were, the people I was hanging around, Joel Edgerton, guys like that who made it big. But there was a real divide between the serious acting world and the commercial world. And when I went through some drama training, it was always about the serious acting, very to little camera training in my day, early 2000s, next to nothing. Even though when I started auditioning, it was all for camera stuff and it was almost all for commercial stuff.
Yep.
So we weren't taught those skills, but as I was auditioning, I learnt those skills. And my career ended up being quite successful in the commercial realm, but not so much in the other one.
Yeah. And so at what point did you get good with that? Was that fine for you right away?
No, oh God, no. I always looked down on it, I think. And I kind of took the piss out of it in my head and sometimes even on the set. And what I didn't realise at the time was how much I was learning about being on set. And I think that that's what drove me towards producing and doing the behind-the-scenes stuff. Was I always really admired what was happening with the crew, the way they were operating, the makeup artists, the way they'd talk to you, the hierarchy of the set. I loved it.
Yep.
So, and when I was doing commercials in the early 2000s, the budgets were big. Like my first commercial was for this alcohol drink called Archers from the UK. So the director was flown from the UK.
Yep.
I think we had 5 or 6 full-size trucks on set. It was ridiculous.
Yep, real money.
Yeah, real money.
Yeah, we have we're lucky to have Bianca with us, who spent years and years as a makeup artist on film sets, but doing series for HBO and all that kind of stuff in Brazil. And one of the things that I think is really important, which you've just nailed, is that on-set time, understanding what the protocols are and understanding you're on. When it's time to be
Absolutely.
on, you are on.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite a lot like hospitality, right? You know, and
yeah, that's right. The clock is ticking and you need to go. But I found that really liberating as an actor because it's easy to stress about your performance, but when you know you've got to nail it, and actually no one is caring that much about your performance, it's mainly about the cup of water and whether it's angled in the right direction. That was quite liberating for me. Took the pressure off.
Yeah, pressure is on the product,
but
right?
the intricacies of camera acting as a commercial actor are so fascinating because you have to have in your mind 10 different things. I need to put the glass of water down at the moment he says this word, and then I need to look over here with the right amount of smile on that word, and every single action is mapped out.
Yep. It's not by accident, right? So that's one of the things that we're finding quite a lot with this podcast, is that I think a lot of people look from the outside and they go, oh, how easy can that be? You know, I mean, it's not difficult to put a glass of water in the place or whatever it is. But it's nuanced, and they are your actions, let alone everybody else who's on that set who you never see.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's part of the thing. I suppose if I could dispel the myth of how easy it is, everyone has a phone in their pocket, which has got a pretty good camera on it, and they've, been used to filming stuff. But it's way more difficult to get it right. And in fact, if you get it right, people shouldn't see it.
Absolutely,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
Yeah. So if you went from doing, serious theatre acting, which is kind of, I don't know, arguably the more academic branch.
Yeah, for sure.
It's also bigger, a bigger kind of a gig. And then you went to commercial, and then you sent you sent this image through to us, which I think is exceptional. I used to want to marry a millionaire. Now I just want to be one. It's a photograph of you. How would you describe this to those people who are listening? How would you describe this image? Okay,
so I'm kind of leaning up against the wall. My top arm is above my head, and I'm giving a really cheeky smile to the camera.
Are you implying that you've shifted? I mean, what does this do? You're wearing a turtleneck.
Okay, so
you're a blonde woman with a...
This is for Macquarie Bank, all right? They were trying to shift the narrative for young women around feeling like we needed to marry a guy to get rich, to feeling empowered to earn our own money. That was the whole shtick.
And then you did earn money for this.
I had good money for that, yeah. So that was a $6,000 contract in probably the year 2000, which was a lot of money.
A lot of money. And then where were you? Where were you famous?
It was a billboard campaign. And at the time, there were billboards everywhere in Sydney. I was living on William Street in King's Cross, and there was a billboard 2 buildings up from mine, which had my face on it. So for about 6 weeks, I used to love it. I'd walk down the street and be like, there I am.
Just being famous.
And there was one on Broadway in Sydney, and that's the closest I've ever gotten to Broadway.
Awesome.
I have been on Broadway.
So you've done that. You've done Macquarie. You've been famous. You've had your moments where you've kind of not given up the dream, I suppose. But in fact, one of the notes that we talked about was that you're always looking for a way to relive the dream. Do you think that kind of, level of you're well-rounded, you've learnt the craft, you've sort of ticked the boxes in a way, and then you have branched out, you've diversified, you've made sure that you've had a career, and I mean, you're paying bills. It's not like this is an accident.
Yeah.
This is a very,
Well, getting into voiceovers was an accident, but that has ended up paying my bills. So that was a lucky turn of fate. And I think in the beginning, I looked at voiceovers in the same way I looked at commercials, like, this is a waste of time. This is beneath me as an artist, but the craft of it is quite intense. And so that always kept me interested. The technique with the microphone and that level of nuance that we talked about that you need to do it well always kept me hooked artistically. And then the money was very welcome.
Yeah.
And it was very steady, and that's been the big difference. And so I've had now 15 years of steady money.
Yeah. How do you, I'm not being rude. I'm asking a question genuinely. How do you stay excited to be for Google or for...
I think the excitement comes down to the fact that I really care about my performance. So I'm always nervous. I'm always nervous that I'm going to do a terrible job, even now, 15 years later. And that kind of keeps me excited, if you want to call it that, because, I have high standards for myself and it's high pressure. And if you get it wrong, then there's a lot riding on it. So that keeps me engaged.
And how do you take all of those learnings and then wrap them up into a job for someone else? So, for example, for us, we've got you to do a bunch of stuff, right? So anything and everything from, you and your husband also had cafes at the Fox studio, right?
Yep.
In Sydney. And so food. So you've written, menus or what have you for us. You've also been involved in wrangling food for smaller shoots, but then you've run spreadsheets and you've done full, approached talent who are going to be on camera for certain things and briefed them, and so it's a really broad range. How do you do that? How do you do that successfully when you've come from being an actor, right? Which some people probably don't have the respect for it that is due. How do you then go into that other camp, which is I'm going to turn all of my experience and knowledge into something that I can leverage to then help other companies?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what we were talking about, the respect for the process, which I've always loved. In theatre, in film, video, it doesn't matter. It's that collaborative teamwork and knowing that every single person plays equally an important role. So I'm just as happy doing this role as this one, as this one, as this one, because we all need to be playing our part. And that's very satisfying to me.
Yep. How do you find that big, I call it the big life, I don't know, Sydney's a much bigger place, it moves faster, it's way more aggressive, the highs are higher, the lows are probably lower.
100%.
You moved to Christchurch because you have a husband who's from here and it was time, you've got a couple of kids and it was a good place to raise them, right? How do you then make sure that you're still professionally satisfied and still bring the A game while you're here? Because we've got a lot of people who end up in Christchurch with international experience who kind of give up on that. So how do you maintain that?
For me, it's almost been the opposite in that I have more time and space now to be creative. I felt much more that I was living in the hamster wheel in Sydney. And so I've written more, I've produced more, I've engaged more since I've been here. It is hard in the sense that it's quite an easy life here. And so the hard thing I think is keeping the flame alive and that's where these relationships are really important. You need fellow artists to keep the fire alive within you and so that you can look each other in the face and say, let's do this and keep each other going, because it's very hard in isolation to keep the dream alive.
Yeah, true that. What about... I suppose creative partnerships. Are you a creative? That's one thing that we keep returning to.
Yes, 100%.
And what does it mean?
Well, isn't that how you view the world?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, what is your version?
I think, and that's why I can equally engage with writing a recipe as a spreadsheet. They're both creative acts.
So it's sort of finding the information that's required for a particular output.
Problem solving, I suppose,
Yep.
is a big part of it.
Yep.
Yeah. I guess I just think creativity is a way of thinking. It's a mindset that's not quite rigid, it's fluid, and you're looking for solutions and ideas. And
even though process is the thing that pulls it together.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of process. Like, I'm quite anal when I'm producing. Everything has to be ticked off and things should run on time, and I get very frustrated in environments where that doesn't happen.
You just said when you walked in here, you said, yeah, good to see we're running on time as per usual.
Absolutely. But I really respect that about you, and probably we couldn't work together as director-producer unless you were like that.
That's true. That's true. So can you think of, is there any one sort of project that you've worked on over the last year or so, or since you've been in New Zealand, or whatever, that's been really fulfilling to you?
Well, definitely the project I came here with, which is the documentary Help Is On The Way, which was about the escape from the Hotel Grand Chancellor after the earthquake. My sister-in-law and her husband were in the building, which is how I knew about the story. And we made a doco about them, but also the other 34 people who were in that building and the construction workers who stayed there and helped get them out, and the crane operators who were underneath the building rescuing them. So artistically and creatively, it was very satisfying. And logistically, it was very satisfying. I mean, that project was almost flawless in terms of lining everything up and how the shoot went. So yeah, that was very satisfying. And then some recognition from the industry for our work.
Yeah. Well, you did have recognition.
Yeah.
You had more than you know. And I was here, so maybe I can say that. I don't know, but I think that's kind of a topic that's going to get the attention, you know, of the awards board or whatever you want to call it. But I think you've got to do it right. You still have to do it right. So what was it? What was the magic sauce that you brought together that meant that it worked?
It was that team. Again, the team. It was the subjects, of course, were to me was very interesting. They were close to me emotionally, so there was some engagement there. And then working with Kirk Flaum, our amazing camera guy, who you're probably going to be talking to. We'd done a few projects before, but this was one where I could really hand over the reins to him, and he knew what my vision was, and he delivered it 100%.
Yep.
I had an incredible executive producer, Irene Gardner, who I now realise how lucky I was to have that person there helping me. And she provided that big umbrella because I hadn't worked in TV before, hadn't worked in New Zealand before. So that was a real safety net. I think the magic sauce happens when the right elements come together.
Yeah. And then also, because one thing that you do is you turn up on the day, whether it's pre-production or production or whatever it is, you turn up and you say, all right, where are we? Where do we need to be? These are the points we need to go over. But you don't impose anything beyond that. You know, it's like it's more that you've understood what is needed to get the shit done, and then you're asking those questions really openly. So I think I don't know if it's a personality thing or if it's that you've come from a bigger marketplace, but
that's a lovely observation, Tim. I don't know that about myself.
That's how you turn up every single time. I don't think, and it's always been well dressed. Good spirits, you know. Even if you're pissed off at something, you don't.
I'm blushing.
Oh well, I'm not blowing smoke, but it's the truth, right? That's one thing that we find with the people that we work with. That's one of the qualities that we seem to find, right? Is that people turn up to do the job that they do, and they enable other people to do their best work. How important is that, and where do you think that comes from with you?
I think it is a personality thing, and I also think it's a little bit a stage of life thing. I mean, I think that's part of the reason you and I get on really well is because we're at a similar stage of life and we've seen enough. And I think I probably used to take it really seriously. Now I still take the job seriously, but I don't take myself seriously. And I think that's the perfect place to be. So you absolutely concentrate and do what needs to be done, but you also know that you're not saving the world at the end of the day. You're just trying to do good camera work. So
Yep. Excellent.
Yeah.
Can you think of are there any ads? I'm just sort of thinking that we might have seen over here, or are there any ads which you remember as being kind of inspired by or have stuck with you when you think of a nostalgic ad?
That I've done, or just that I've seen?
That you've done or that you've seen, either one.
It's funny
because I know that you've done a bunch of stuff. You've done some serious acting ones around bushfires and stuff in Australia, and we'll share a link to that as well.
There was one that I did that was quite funny. It was for Handy Paper Towel, and the tagline was "Holy sheet, my sheet of paper towel." And so my scenario was the dog peeing on the floor and me coming in, you know, "Oh, Max, whole sheet." So cheesy, but I think that did air in New Zealand.
But it works, right?
It works.
You know, it sticks. What do you think are the successful ingredients for a piece of advertising?
I think generally it needs to be funny and a bit quirky. Yep. And I'm sure that Kiwis do that really well. You've probably had some memorable ads here, haven't you?
We have. I think there's a certain how do we say this? I mean, I don't know why I'm even trying to protect that, but I think we're reasonably conservative, you know, and so we're happy to have a bit of a laugh, as long as it's proven to be funny somewhere else. So I think about you know, Taika Waititi did an ad which he probably directed and he featured in for Steinlager, I think.
Yes.
I don't think it was the funniest ad in the world, but it definitely pushed some boundaries for what it was to be a New Zealand ad and definitely for that brand.
Yeah.
And at the time, I think it was only successful because his films had been successful overseas.
Yeah.
I think if that had come without the context of those films and the name associated, it would have been too much. People go, there, you're off your rocker.
I do notice here that people still use quite a lot of jingles. Like there's this radio ad on, I have to listen to The Edge in the car with my girls because it's the only station I can tune into. And there's this ad that just cracks me up so hard for Interflora. It's like, say I love you, say kia ora, send fresh flowers with Interflora. And it just reminds me of like 1980s.
Yeah.
And it is going strong.
And here we are repeating it.
But it sticks. Yeah,
There it
totally.
is,
Yep.
you
It's
know.
the earworm.
Yeah, it's interesting,
A good
isn't
jingle
it?
goes a long way.
Goes a long way. Well,
Yeah.
that's actually, you're not the only one who's mentioned about songs or
Yeah.
about sound beds, because I think that is really important. And that, of course, that's part of the thing. I think as we get more sophisticated in this country, as we've been more exposed and as we've got more people who have come back from overseas and seen bigger and brighter things, we're probably happier to at least entertain the idea of doing something like that. But I think it falls short on execution sometimes when...
Yeah, but hopefully the age of the internet and brands being a bit more comfortable going into that sphere means we can be a bit more experimental and not have those same fears about conservative audience response.
You would think so,
cetera.
right?
Yeah.
You know, I read a marketing report recently which is basically that salience is being top of mind is the number one thing for any brand, and that the human brain is disposed to finding a reason. If you need to go to a tire place and that particular tire place is on the top of your mind, you will find all the reasons in the world why the others aren't up to the same standard. So, you know, I don't know. I think maybe if we just get out there a bit more and push it, then maybe we'll have some better results, and hopefully that comes with fun.
Yeah, hopefully.
Right.
My girls watch Mr. Beast on YouTube. Have you ever seen Mr. Beast?
No.
Oh, he's just this guy, and he does these stupid stunts with people. Like, you need to go and live in a house for 100 days and not leave the parameter, and if you do, I'll give you $500,000. And he has so many followers that he's got the money, and it started here and it's built up to this thing. And I got sucked into watching it with the girls the other day, and I thought, this is amazing because it's like reality TV on steroids. He can do whatever the F he wants because it's his show, his money. And it got me thinking about ad world a little bit, like, if we could just shift a bit more into that sphere.
Risk.
Right? It's risky. It's
Yeah.
really risky, but it works.
Well, because the argument for me is if you don't, play high risk, you will never get high reward. You'll always be mediocre.
Absolutely.
But whatever. So let's talk about...
One word people would not use to describe you, Tim. Mediocre.
Well, hopefully not. Hopefully it bombs spectacularly or it soars. Hey, let's talk about, we did touch on that a little bit before about relationships. Do you set boundaries? Do you let people know what's expected or any of that kind of stuff? Is that important? Or
I think it's really important. I'm not sure that I do it consciously, but I think I have gotten quite good at communicating expectations.
Yeah.
And I think that you need to be really clear about what you expect from people in their role, what your timelines are. Good communication is key to being a good producer, especially.
Yep. And so for your voiceover work, you still have an agent?
I do.
Right?
Yeah.
And so do they manage that kind of world for you, I suppose?
They manage a lot of it, which is amazing. But now that I'm working remotely, I manage the sessions with the clients, and that can often come with a lot of expectations. And when I started doing voice work, I found it really intimidating because you might have 15 clients on the other side of the glass discussing your performance, and the engineer and the ad agencies. And they don't necessarily have the language to communicate with you what they want. They can only say things like, no, that's not it. And then you'd start dying on the microphone, and eventually you learn, okay, let me try this. Shall I try this for you? How about I do it this way, until you get to where they want you to be.
Yeah.
But at first you just think, oh my God.
And everyone has an
hate
opinion,
me.
right?
Everyone has an opinion.
And sometimes those people who haven't said anything feel like they need to say something.
To prove themselves,
Yeah.
yep.
It's difficult, right? Because it doesn't actually necessarily get anything better from you. Sometimes it can, but it doesn't necessarily.
No, but your job is to stay calm
Yeah.
and cool and to not let them know that you think they're an idiot and just to keep going and to end with a smile.
Yep. Have you seen or have we talked about Toast of
Yeah, I love
London?
it.
Yeah, so good. All right, we'll share a link as well on this
Yeah.
to Toast of London because I think there's a really, really amusing scene where he has to say yes.
Oh,
Why don't you just lose the script, Stephen? It's just one word. Yeah, it's just one word. He goes and has a look back at it. It's fantastic.
well, the weird thing is the less words you have to say, often the harder it is.
Yeah, right.
You'll get the script and there'll be 4 words and you think, oh, I'll be out of here in 5 minutes. They're the ones where they're like, can you just, you're leaning on the oh sound a bit too much. Can we just shorten that but then land on the d? And yeah, okay, no worries.
So if you had to think of a favourable or a memorable Ruffells moment, what would it be? Do you have one in particular?
Oh, well, I liked doing the ad over the fence for trade staff.
Yeah.
Yes, that was great. It was probably you directing that actress behind the flowers with the curtain, and to me that landed the exact right amount of comedy and getting the point across. And
Yeah.
also the clients seemed so lovely
Yep.
to work with.
Yep, they
Dream
were.
clients, they came in, they were like, yep, you guys are on it, swooped out again.
Yeah.
But that was a very tight set. We had some great actors. The script worked. Everything was working.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't even think you put it all in place, turned up on the day, went right.
I think
you
I
were
just
set.
went and got the sausage rolls and
Yeah.
that was it.
Yeah, that was about it though, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So is that? I mean, because as you know, you're working for yourself, and you're busy. You're doing a whole bunch of stuff outside of the work you're doing for other companies like ours. Is that? Would you say that because you communicated to us that you'd done everything, you were happy to stay? I didn't ever feel like you were trying to skive off or any of that stuff. You probably would have stayed if we'd said, can you stay around? But there was no need.
Yeah, I think mostly the producer should be able to step away from the set, and that's partly why I like that role as opposed to the director. I like getting the work in place and then handing it over. I mean, it should be, the end of the day, it should be the director running that ship.
Yep.
And I like the surprise of being in the edit room and seeing what comes up and
How it works out the other end. Excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent. I mean, I don't know. Is there anything else? Is there any cautionary tales that you want to share? Is there anything that a client, a marketing manager, or an owner of a brand, if you wish that they knew to make the process better, the outcome better, what would it be?
I would say trust your talent a bit more in the studio, on set. What do you think? What do you think about this? How would you do this? Because that can often bring out something really interesting. Like I always like that if I'm doing a voice session and they direct me however, and at the end they go, do one however you want.
Yeah.
And yeah, just ask for the talent's input a bit more because we've been on lots of sets. We understand branding. So take advantage of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Dial into the experience.
Yeah.
And leverage it.
Leverage it.
Because, I mean, why employ people and not let them do their best work?
Yeah.
Hey, Claire, thank you very much. You've been amazing.
Such a pleasure.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed that. I've got nothing else to say other than where can people find you? How do people get in touch with Clare Mackey?
If you'd like my voice, I have claremackeyvoice.com. You can book me there. I would say book me through my agent, RMK in Sydney, but that'll probably cost you a lot more. So, or contact me via Tim at Ruffells because I happily freelance through you guys.
Absolutely. We'll put links to everything in the descriptions. So that's awesome. Thank you very much for coming in. Thanks for sharing your expertise.
Thank you.